Good morning, everyone. This is Lori with Sugar Melts, and I want to show you a card I've been working on for a while. I love this new set that came out, the Quiet Meadow Cling Stamp Set. So this is kind of the focal stamps for today that I'm using in the card. If you don't have this particular set though, you're going to see that a lot of stamp sets would work just fine for this, but I just happen to have this stamp set with the dies. The die set that goes with this is the Meadow dies. And the ones that we'll be using today are, I'm just going to lay some of these out for you. I don't have anything cut. I thought I'd just do the whole thing on the video today, every single step. So these are the four that I'm using. There are a lot of wildflower dies on the market. And as you'll see again, this is a really flexible kind of card that would work with probably anything that you have. So doesn't have to match this exactly. This is what the card looks like. This first one I did with the hues of green. I used Soft Succulent and Evening Evergreen to make this card. And then I did it in more of a brown hue. There's this one here. And the colors I used were Crumb Cake, Soft Suede, and a little bit of Early Espresso just to give it some more depth. But it just, to me, came out so lovely. Just a shabby chic kind of card that, I don't know. I just love the way it all came together with texture and colors. And it came together so fast. Oh my gosh. So let's just get started. So today's card, what I'll do in this version, I want to do it in gray and black hues. So I'll be using a couple of different colors here. I've got a light gray called Smoky Slate, a darker gray called Basic Gray, and then my black ink. Probably end up using more of the Memento. I do have this old stamp pad, so we'll see if I haven't used it for a while because it's not available anymore. If there's enough ink, we'll use that. I'll be using some glue dots to secure the dies together once they're punched out. Some glue, a little bit of this lovely light thread. To me, it's just, again, kind of that country shabby chic thread to hold the flowers together. And 2 pieces of paper. That's it. I have this speckled paper that I love. It just gives, again, that texture in the background, a little more interest. And so we'll just be using that. No designer series paper, no pattern paper. And then I pulled out the markers that I have, whatever I have available right now, and we'll see what I end up doing with those. I'm just gonna kind of wing it here. We'll see what happens. So, okay, so let's get started. So I've got our paper. The first thing we'll do is we're gonna cut this paper down to size. Oops, make some space here. Okay, so take my first sheet of paper and I'm going to go ahead and just, it's 11 by 8.5, so I'm just going to go ahead and cut it right there in the middle at 5.5. And I'll leave these 2 sheets as halves. And then I'll take my second sheet and I'm going to cut it into 4 equal squares. So that's the 5.5. And then that goes to 4 1/4. There we go. Okay. And then the other half we'll do at the 4 1/4 also. Okay, so that will give us 4 squares. So what I want to do, so I'm going to be folding this half sheet into half, so it'll be your typical card size. And then we're going to use these 4 pieces as each of the layers. And all I'm going to do is cut them each in by 1/4 inch on each side, and then another 1/4 inch and another 1/4 inch, so that you end up with these 4 layers of cards, each one slightly smaller. And then we'll do the stamping. Okay, so the first card here, I've got it at 5.5, so I'm going to bring that in to 5 1/4. By 4. Okay, so that was brought in. one step each way. The second one, I'm going to bring that into, let's do this right here at 5, and then that'll go to 3 3/4. The second, and then the third one comes into 4 3/4 by 3 1/2. Is that right? 1, 2, nope. Yeah, 3 1/2. That's right, 3 1/2. Okay. And then the last one, 1, 2, 3, 4. So let me make sure everything's all in order here. 1, 2, 3, and then our fourth one. So the first one, 1, 2, 3. So that's going to be at 4 1/2. And then we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. There we go. I've been doing this, like I said, kind of spontaneous, so I haven't been writing them down. I just, pop them in as I go. So now you've got all 4 that are in by 1/4 of an inch on each one. Okay, so we can get rid of our cutting board. Next thing we can do is we can go ahead and fold our half sheet, get that scored so that is ready to secure everything as soon as we get to that spot. My tool here, so that's 8 1/2, and we're going to go ahead and score that at 4 1/4. Done. Get that out of the way. Get our bone folder out. Okay, so we've got this. I've got a bunch of stamps already secured to the blocks. The 2 stamp sets that I'm using today, as I mentioned, I've got the Quiet Meadows, and I'm also using Timeless Textures. If you have this set, this is such a great set. I'll be using several stamps from here, probably the dots, this polka dots here, the long one, and then these other 2, 3 actually. This is just such a great set for a project like this. And I need a sheet of paper for stamping. Let me get a blank sheet of paper here to protect my workspace. Okay. Guess we need a second one, which we will use later. Get that out of the way. I like this also because there's very little left over. I'm not dealing with a whole bunch of paper that I feel like I've wasted. So this is going to be our base card right here. And then there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's always a good idea, I think. And you've heard the expression measure twice, cut once. Also, just measure twice, stamp once. So you don't want to stamp your cards if you've got one that's off. So just go ahead and double check, make sure everything lines up where you want them to. And of course you can stamp them in any order that you want. I do like to start with the one that's on top that I'm going to be looking at. It's going to be the focal point for the card. So I've got a couple of ink pads here, and I don't want anything too dark on the front, so I'm going to be testing the colors, because again, I haven't actually done this with the gray yet. I've done this with the green and the brown, but I haven't done it with the gray. So let's just kind of take a look here and see how dark these are. And I want to be really careful not to accidentally cross stamp between them. So let's start with my flower. So this big stamp here, I'll go ahead and stamp it out so you can see which one we're doing. This is the wildflower. Let's see what that looks like when I stamp it. Oh, that's pretty. And then if I do is, let's see what it looks like if I stamp off. That might be a little lighter than I want. I may want to go with the darker one here. Okay. The other thing I'm going to have for this background to give it texture is on the stamp set, there's this wonderful script at the top. So I've got that on here. One thing you'll notice when you do it, at least for me, I should probably mark the back of it, because I always have to stamp out to see if I'm upside down or not. So always check first, make sure you're not upside down. So there, I know this is the right side up, but I don't want it that dark on the paper. So I'm going to be stamping off. There we go. And just to give it sort of that background, that hint of color. Keep going. There we go. So just again, some essence in the background. And then I'm going to put my flowers on here. Okay. I don't want this too dark. And I also want it to kind of fall off the edge there. So one, oops. And then I'll do another one. And then I'm going to even do a third. Now remember, we're going to have more on here, plus we're going to have the die cuts kind of covering a lot of this. So we're just going to have it sort of peeking through. Okay. And now I want to decorate the edges. I love this stamp for doing edging. I think this is just such a great stamp. Have you seen this one? I usually don't use the full stamp. I just kind of tap the edges. Look how cute that is. Oh, love it. Okay, so we're just going to lightly put some of this around the edges until you're happy with your outcome. It just keeps those edges from getting too harsh with the white. I just like a little color to kind of block all of that. I feel like I may want a little more up there. I like that. So I can set that aside. And I've also got this other stamp from the set with the dots. So if I do the dots pretty dark, I'm not going to like how that shows up. But I can do, you know, kind of stamp it off, and it just lightens everything up. Almost like a watermark, or like kind of reminds me of raindrops on the windshield. After they've dried, it just gives a little bit of feeling there. So perfect. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. So we can set that aside. Totally trashed that page. Oops, it went all the way through. We'll just fold that in half. Okay, so then we can do our second card. And I can do, again, I've got all these background edgings. So we can do really whatever we want here. This one, I can put a lot more on the edge. You're not going to see most of this because that first layer we did will cover a lot of this up. You see how quickly this is going. So I can do that. So that's what that's going to look like. Ooh, I like that. That looks good. That looks really good. So now our third layer, I've got this other stamp here. Oops. This reminds me more of what wood, like a wood trim. Okay, just keep covering all the edges here. There we go. Get a little more there. Then I want to do something else with this, maybe. I've got these this polka dot stamp from that set also, so we can kind of put some of those in here. Create that texture, that differentiation when they're layered on top of each other. Okay, don't worry about anything in the middle. Again, it's mostly going to be covered up. We're only going to be seeing the edges of this. So now we've got these 3 layers. That's coming together. And then we'll do this 4th layer. So for this 4th layer, let's see what we should do. I want to use some of my polka dots. Let's do this. Let's start with this one here. This is the grid. So we can start with the grid. And then we can just keep supplementing it as we go around. There we go. And then if I want to add a little more to this one, I've got this other dot stamp that I love from that set. So I can just keep adding to this. Here we go. Okay, so now let's take a look at what the 4 layers are coming together as. And you can see we've used 1 sheet of paper and just a couple stamps and 1 ink pad, and it's come together really nice so far. Already you've got several layers here, and we're going to keep going and keep doing some more with this. So the last one we have will be our top layer. Now for this one, I'm going to go back to that original one that I was using. Sure, yep, there it is. I had planned to use more of the different colors, but I'm kind of liking this gray one. It's actually a lot darker than I was expecting it to be once I started stamping with it. So there we've got that one stamped all the way around. Couple things I'm going to do with this top layer though. I want to distress this. There's different ways to distress. You can tear your card. You can use a nail file and just rub it against the edges. I have this old distress tool by Tim Holtz that has a blade inside each one of these. And so this is what I'll be using here real quick. And I'm just gonna kind of roughen up the edges. And it's okay if it's, you know, you're distressing it. So if you get it a little rough on the edge there, because the corners are definitely weaker. They don't have the bulk of the paper there as weight behind them. So if it's a little rougher than you expected, it's okay. I just be careful, or, you know, go a little slower on those corners. Whether you're using, again, if you're just tearing it, or if using a nail file. There's different distress tools. And of course, you know, your local craft store may have something that they recommend these days. I haven't looked for one lately, so I'm not sure if there's any kind of new tools on the market. Those are always fun. Okay. So that just gives it sort of that softer look. I want this one to be a little... There we go. And then once more down here. Ooh, okay. I don't recommend dumping it on the floor like I do, but that's what I did. So for all of these edges though, what I think helps to break up the whiteness of it is to use a marker on the edge. I have several, so let's just take a look and see which. We've got a basic gray. I've got the smoky slate, which does match the stamp pad we've been using. And then I've got some black, shades of black here. So let's just see what this one, no, I may want it a little darker than that even. So I'm going to try with, which one is this? Basic gray. And you can also distress all the edges. That can take a while. I won't bore you with that right now on camera. Just rub the marker along the edge so then you don't see that white core coming through. Even if you're using a colored paper, it helps to run that same shade on there. It just gives it a shadow effect in the background. There we go, all 4 done there. And then you can also break out your sponges, and you could sponge some of these edges too. That's, you know, very common. Everybody does those, different kinds of sponges. You don't have to have a fancy sponge. There's different kinds. I've got an assortment of different kinds of sponges that I use. Just probably more either personal preference or the size of the area. If you wanted to sponge, you certainly can do that. That would probably be in the same vein of what we're doing here today, giving it that effect. and then on the base card. So it does help when you open the card up to make sure you're doing both edges evenly, especially since I distressed them. It can be pretty easy to miss some components since it's not even anymore. So we'll just do it like that, and then the binder there, little binding edge. Okay, I'll make sure I do the back. Okay. Okay, so there we've got this. Now the other thing I want to do here before we get much further is we want to do the die cuts. So I'm going to set all of these pieces. So we've got one there. This will go on top of that. That'll go on top of that. That'll go on top of that. And then we'll have the die cuts on top. So let's look at those for a second. Okay, and get all this. Oh my gosh. Move some of this stuff out of the way. And so do you remember at the beginning we had that extra sheet, that half piece of paper? So we can use that to create for the die cuts. What I've done it now 2 ways. On the green card that we did, I cut them out first, and then I used one of these brushes that I got from Dollar Store, I think. They're makeup brushes, though I've never known anyone to use them for makeup. I've used that to color the die cuts. What I found though was that some of the little leaves were delicate, so I felt that I was at risk to maybe tear one off. So the next time what I did for the brown one was I just colored the paper and then I die cut. And I think that may be a little safer, depending on the kind of dies that you're using. If you're using the same die cuts as I am here, you may find the same experience that it's a little, some of the leaves you just don't, you don't want to rip them off. So all we do for this part, and I haven't done it with this color, oh well, we'll see what happens. Pick up some ink here and see if it's the right shade that you want. Start with your lightest and then go up, okay? And I'm not picking up a lot of ink on this, so I don't know if that's because of the shade that I'm using, which is why I grabbed that old black ink, because I thought, well, I may end up wanting to go to that to get more color picked up. That's okay. We'll just keep picking up some ink here. And if you are following along with me and you end up with, they always say it's best to start off the paper that you're bringing the ink onto so you don't get a big glop of ink right in the middle. The nice thing about this kind of project is because you're doing the die cut, you won't have all of those harsh elements where you're cutting the die. It'll kind of go around that. You'll only be picking up parts of the paper. So let's see, I haven't used this ink pad in a long time because they stopped selling it. And I'm going from gray to dark, so I'm not too worried about this. Let me just pick up some dark ink here. See? Okay, that's good. So this is a good use. If you've got some old ink pads that either are damaged or they're not in colors anymore, you can't get refills for them, they're a little dry and you don't have the ink to add to it, whatever the reason is, this can be a really nice project for that, because you're not using them otherwise for stamps, but this way you can dye some paper and pick up. How pretty is that going to be? So that's kind of what we're looking for here. We're going to just do about half of this page and then we'll die cut out of it, and we won't be at risk of tearing any of the leaves when we're brushing over it. So if we get a little aggressive there. So, okay, so that's probably pretty good. Let's compare that to the paper. So that's what that's going to look like as the die cuts on there. I like it. Okay. Let's get that ink pad out of the way. And we'll bring in There we go. No, don't drop anything. Okay, got my die cuts here. So I'm probably going to do this in 2 stretches so that I'm not trying to force too many die cuts through. The way I do this, or too many dies through, is I think they cut best if you get them really in the center of your cutting boards. I just find that that works out much, much better. So I don't like to do them way at the end, so which is why I'll often run it through twice, just so I'm not risking that. I'm going to do this right in the middle, and then what I'll be able to do is do my other ones, I think, right along in there. Well, let me bring them down here, just in case. That should be enough. How about that? Okay, and then put the other one on top. And I'll do my other 2 dies here in a second. Let me just, oh, my workspace gets so crowded trying to have everything within arm's reach for the camera. And I'm gonna go through a couple times just because these are great dies and they go through, but there's a couple little spots that it's just so much easier to pop out if I just run it through a couple times just to be sure. And then I don't risk, again, tearing that paper trying to get one little speck out. Okay, so here's that. These dies out of the way. And this pops out. Perfect. See, those little tiny holes popped out perfectly. There's 1. And then there's 2 that popped out perfectly. And so let me do my other 2 dies here. See if I can sneak them in to fit perfectly on the edge of that page. Bring them down to the middle. So run that through. And you're going to hear that crack. That's entirely normal. It will always leave marks into your cutting boards. Okay. Perfect. And this pops, oh, look at that. Just see, it just pops right out. So easy. And then I've got a couple little things in here, but these are coming out without even needing to run a brush over it or anything. Okay, set that aside. Okay. The 4 dies are gone. Okay, so now we're pretty much done with the card. Look at that. So then these flowers will go over the top. Now, if we want to give a little more depth, because now that you've cut them out, you may think, well, what I'm thinking right now is I want a little more shadow on these. These look a little monotone for me. So I'm going to bring out this again and just add a little more, but I don't have to do the whole thing, so I won't have to rub too hard on this to get that shadow effect. Oops, see, gotta be careful not to damage that flower, which is what I've been saying I wasn't gonna do. And there, I did it. So just in a few spots, just to, again, give some shadow effect, very gently, as you saw by my mistake. Okay, and then here's this one. Pick up some black ink. And that gives, oh, that looks much nicer there with a little bit, just more, a little bit more color on there, a little darker on the edges. And then we'll just, there we go. That's the great thing about these projects. You could just keep messing with it until you get it the way you want it. What I found in a lot of these projects, when you're stamping, when you're sponging, when you're adding these, that most people, when they're not happy with the colors, it's just because they haven't added enough color. And if they keep adding the color and keep working at it, they'll eventually get to where they do like the hue. So sometimes if you're not happy, it's just because it honestly isn't complete. and just keep applying and it will beautifully come together. So I'm really happy with how those look. Get my paper out of the way here. And we can start kind of securing this together and see how it looks. Okay, so start with the biggest one again. Always check twice. So this will be against that one there. So get my glue out. And I'm going to layer all of these so that they are off center. I think that's part of the key for why I've been happy with this card so much, is because it's not aligned perfectly. And now if you're doing an 1/8 difference versus a 1/4, it's going to be a little hard to get it off. There's just not a lot of wiggle room. But with 1/4 of an inch in on each one, you can just alternate them quite easily with that wiggle room to make them off center. Okay, and so this one, I'm going to go like that. And you could use dimensionals to pop them up. I would just be a little careful not to do dimensionals in each one. It might be a little thicker than you want it, but I don't know, maybe not. Might be perfect. So you can see how you just get a hint of each of the mattings underneath. Okay. Oops. We'll tip that one like that. So now to secure the flowers, there's probably lots of ways to do this. This is the way I've been doing it. I've been using my glue dots and securing them together with glue dots, and then I'll show you how we do the ribbon. Okay, so I'm gonna secure this one to that one. Let me get my pokey tool here. And let's find a glue dot. And I just, pick a spot on here, the whitest spot, secure that glue dot onto the die cut. And then I'm gonna just layer this one on top at an angle. Okay, there's 2. And then we'll do a 3rd one right there in the middle. And I'll take this one at an angle here. There's that. And then our 4th one is right there. Boom. Oop, oop, boom. I totally took it off. There we go. Okay, so all 4 are now stick together by these glue dots. And we'll have more glue on here, but this is just sort of the immediate holding spot. I want to add ribbon to this. Now this ribbon, I've been using it in the brown form, but you can also dye it to make it match. Where'd my scissors go? I had scissors out. Oh, here they go. You can also dye it to match your project. There's lots of ways to dye it, and I don't need it to be perfectly black or gray. Just want sort of that, again, the essence of it. So I'm going to take this and find this marker here, see what this looks like. And I just sample it on, oh, that's a little darker than I want. I don't want to use that one. Okay, I'm just going to do this at the ends, so then I can cut off whatever I don't want. That's still a little darker than I wanted. Actually, once it's against the flowers, it's not terrible. Maybe I will do that. Okay, I'll use the light one. And I'm only gonna do just, gently run it along whatever ribbon you have, whatever thread you're using. If you want it more exact, you can use ink refills. You can run it across a stamp pad. This to me just, again, gives it that country, not perfect. I like the homemade look. That's why we do these projects. Not trying to be, there we go. Okay, just running along. I may not use all this paper. We can trim it later, or this thread, I'm sorry. I just pull off a stretch and then I see how many times I'm going to go around the flowers, how long I want the thread. Let's see how we go. I haven't measured it yet. I haven't measured it once on all of these cards. I just sort of pull out what feels right. So, okay, so that gives us a little bit of that darker feel. So we've run this marker across. Is the whole thing pitch black? Nope. Is it dark gray in spots? You can just kind of go back through. See how you like it. See what works for you. Whatever color works. Okay. So then what I did, so I take this ribbon and I'm going to fold it in half. Find that, pull that through. Okay, so that's about what I'm looking at here. That's what I'm going to use. I don't know what I'm going to end up with, but so there's my middle right there in that spot. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use another glue dot back here. Okay, so let's get out the glue dots, pull it off, and you want it at the bottom just like you would tie flowers. Find kind of a narrow area, just like you would tie a bunch of wildflowers from a field, and push that down into the flowers. Okay, gently pull everything up. And I've been wrapping it around just 2 or 3 times. Careful of the little branches that are coming off the die cuts there. Okay, so I've got my little wrap, and then I'm just going to tie a bow here. Pull that through. Then we tie the bow. Okay. Okay. So this is a little longer than I want. That's okay. Got the bow. Now I can shorten it. Oops. So one of these double bows is, come on. Sorry, I'm talking to you while I'm working on this bow here. So pull on that one. There we go. So let's get it nice and snug. This long bow, remember, is where we folded it. So I'm going to be cutting that in half. Okay, so what I'm going to do, so I'm just going to cut that in half, open the bow up, and then I can trim down these ties, the loose legs, so that they all match. I like them about the length of the loops. Careful not to cut the loops. Bring that out, cut the loops, and there's my bundle of flowers. And then I'm going to just glue this right onto the top. So you can see all those wildflowers we did before. You're just going to see the essence of that stamp on the paper. Okay, here we go. I just, dab a bunch of glue in that center area because you want it to come off the paper. At least I like it to come off the paper. Okay. Be sure that nothing goes over the edge of your paper or it may not fit in your envelope. Oops, it jumped on me there. Okay, hold it down for just a second. Oh my gosh, how pretty is that? I haven't done the inside of the card on this one, but I want to show you what I did just for the brown one. I just took a piece of paper and again, I sponged on the edges and just stamped on the sides. You can do again whatever you want, put a sentiment. I did put a sentiment on my green one, the Thinking of You, which comes in the Quiet Meadow set. So, but this is the essence of what this card looks like. I hope you enjoyed today's class in looking at, keeping it simple, just using layers and using couple of stamps, one ink pad, and how to just optimize what you've already got and use that to make such a beautiful and elegant card for your loved ones. Hope you're having a great day. See you soon. Bye.